On an ordinary afternoon in Chicago, a mother walked out of an elementary school holding the hands of her two children. Nothing felt unusual. Nothing suggested that within minutes she would be fighting for her life on a public sidewalk. There is video of what happened next. A crowd of children, shouting, footsteps rushing forward, a woman trying to shield her son, a little girl frozen in fear, and a moment that shocked an entire city. The clip spread online before anyone had time to understand it. Most people saw only a few seconds, a mother dragged, kicked, and beaten as her children screamed for help. But behind those few seconds is a longer story, one filled with warnings no one acted on, a school that had been alerted again and again, and a pattern of behavior that had been allowed to grow in silence. This wasn't a random outburst. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the result of months, even years, of complaints that went nowhere. And for Corshawnda Hatter, a mother already fighting a serious medical condition, it became the moment her strength was pushed to its limit. Today, we're going to slow things down. We're going to understand what really happened outside that school, why it escalated the way it did, why no adult stepped in soon enough, and how a group of children managed to unleash an attack so shocking that even seasoned investigators paused when they saw the footage. Because once you understand the full chain of events, you'll see that this wasn't just an attack. It was a warning, one the city can no longer ignore. Before the chaos, there was a morning like any other. Corshawnda Hatter woke up in her Chicago home, getting her two children ready for school. A 9-year-old boy who loved drawing, and a 6-year-old girl who still held her mother's hand wherever they went. They packed their backpacks. They argued over small things, the way siblings do. And then they stepped out into the cool air and began the walk toward Orville T. Bright Elementary. Nothing about that walk felt unusual, but behind that simple routine, there was a truth the family had learned to live with. For almost 2 years, her son had been targeted by other students. It didn't begin with fists, it started with teasing, pushing, name-calling. Then it grew. School officials were told. Teachers were told. Notes were sent home. Meetings were requested. But every morning, Corshawnda hoped the situation would get better. Every morning, she walked her son to school with the same quiet hope. That today would be different. Her health made everything harder. Living with sickle cell disease meant every stressful moment carried a risk. But like any mother, she pushed through it for her children. On that morning, she had no reason to believe anything was waiting for them outside the school. No hint of how quickly the day would shift. No warning of the crowd that would form. No sign of the storm that was about to collide with her family. It began with a simple walk home. A walk she had taken hundreds of times. But this time, some of the children trailing behind them weren't just following. They were watching, studying, waiting. And the moment they saw an opportunity, they took it. Classes had ended for the day, and the sidewalk outside Bright Elementary was crowded the way it always is. Children laughing, parents talking, everyone heading in different directions. But as Corshawnda and her two kids began walking home, she felt something change. At first, it was nothing more than voices behind them. A few students talking loudly. A shout here, a taunt there. It wasn't unusual. Those same kids had followed her son before. They had called out his name in ways no child should hear. Corshawnda tightened her grip on her daughter's hand, the little girl swinging her arm the way she always did when she felt nervous. Her son walked close to her, eyes down, hoping the day would end quietly. But the voices behind them grew louder. More footsteps joined in. A small group became a crowd. The rhythm of their walk changed. Corshawnda could hear the cluster of kids gaining on them. Quick steps, fast breathing, bursts of laughter that didn't sound playful. She turned once, just enough to see a group forming. Faces she recognized. Children who had targeted her son before. Children who had been spoken to by teachers, but nothing more. She kept walking. She didn't want to escalate anything. Her daughter hugged her arm. Her son whispered, "Mom, they're following us." The sidewalk stretched ahead of them, but it felt shorter now. Too many voices. Too many eyes. Corshawnda wasn't scared for herself. She was scared for them, her two babies, both within reach of her arms. She slowed her pace, trying to place herself between her children and the growing crowd behind them. Then one of the kids shouted something she couldn't ignore. A threat! Clear. Targeted. Corshawnda stopped walking. For a moment, everything around them felt still. Cars passed. Parents walked by. No one realized what was unfolding only a few steps away. This was the point where the walk home stopped being a walk at all. and the danger that had been growing for months finally stepped into the open. Corshawnda stood still for only a second, but for the group behind her, that was the signal they were waiting for. A boy stepped forward, then another, then more. Children, far too young to understand the level of harm they were about to cause, closed the distance between themselves and a mother who was simply trying to walk home. Corshawnda moved her daughter behind her. Her son stayed close to her side. He already knew what was coming. He had lived through enough of these moments to recognize the look in their eyes. One of the kids shoved him. A quick, sharp push that knocked him off balance. Corshawnda reacted instantly, stepping in front of him, her arms out. Her instinct was not to swing, not to yell, but to shield. To protect. But the group didn't stop. Suddenly, hands reached toward them from every direction. A punch landed on her arm. Another struck her son. Then the crowd surged forward all at once. Corshawnda tried to stand her ground, but there were too many of them. A child grabbed her hair. Another kicked her leg. Someone pushed from behind. She fell to one knee, still holding onto her daughter's hand, trying desperately not to let go. Her 6-year-old screamed, her voice cutting through the noise. A sound no child should ever have to make. Corshawnda was dragged to the pavement. Small fists hit her face. Feet kicked her ribs. Her medical condition turned every impact into something far more dangerous than anyone realized. But she didn't curl into herself. She didn't cover her own head. She reached for her son instead. He was being hit too, punched, shoved, kicked, surrounded by children who showed no hesitation. He tried to run to her. He tried to get close enough for her to pull him in. But the crowd kept separating them. On the sidewalk of a Chicago school, a mother lay on the ground trying to protect 2 children at once. A crowd of young attackers encircled them, and not one adult was close enough to stop it. The attack lasted seconds, but for Corshawnda and her kids, it felt like an eternity. A blur of hands, feet, shouts, and fear. A moment that would replay in the minds of all 3 long after the bruises faded. When the final kick landed, and the crowd suddenly scattered, the street fell silent in a way that didn't match what had just happened. Corshawnda tried to get up, but her body couldn't respond. Her daughter knelt beside her, crying. Her son reached for her hand, shaking. This was the moment someone finally dialed 911. The moment help was needed, but arrived far too late to stop what those children had already done. When the last of the children ran off, the silence felt unreal. Moments earlier, the sidewalk had been filled with shouts, movement, and fear. Now it was just a mother lying on the ground, struggling to breathe, and 2 children frozen beside her. Corshawnda's daughter crouched next to her, holding her mother's arm with both hands, as if pulling hard enough could wake her up. Her son stood over them, shaking so badly he could barely keep his balance. His shirt was stretched from people grabbing it. His lip was bleeding. He kept saying the same thing over and over. "Mommy, can you hear me?" Cars continued passing on the street. A few adults in the distance stared, but didn't come close right away. No one understood what they had just seen. No one realized how serious it was until Corshawnda tried to push herself up and her body wouldn't respond. Her medical condition made every second more dangerous. Her breathing was shallow. Her hands trembled. The stress alone could send her into a crisis, and the blows she had taken only raised the stakes. A neighbor finally ran over, stunned by the scene. They called 911 while another person turned their phone toward the ground, recording what was left of the attack's aftermath. Not to go viral. Not for attention, but because they couldn't believe what they were looking at. The recording captured a mother lying across cold pavement. Her daughter crying with her head pressed to her chest. Her son whispering prayers, begging her to wake up. And a neighborhood that suddenly felt heavier than it had minutes earlier. When paramedics arrived, they moved quickly. They lifted Corshawnda onto a stretcher, stabilizing her as gently as they could. Her son was taken into the ambulance with her. He held onto her hand the entire time. He didn't want to let go. He was terrified she might disappear if he blinked. Her daughter followed behind with a neighbor, still wiping tears from her cheeks. As the ambulance pulled away, blue lights reflecting against the brick walls of the school, the question lingered in the air. How did this happen here? And how had no one stopped it sooner? The attack itself lasted seconds, but the video that captured the aftermath spread for hours. It began with a single post on social media. A blurry clip. No caption. Just a short recording of Corshawnda lying on the ground while her children cried beside her. At first, only a few people saw it. Someone commented, asking what happened. Another replied with what little they knew. Then the clip was shared. and shared again. Within minutes, hundreds of people were watching a mother struggle to breathe on a Chicago sidewalk. Thousands of strangers felt their stomachs drop as they replayed the moment her son whispered, "Mommy, please get up." The little girl's crying echoed through phones all across the city. No one knew the full story yet. No one knew who the woman was, or what led to this moment. But they knew one thing. A mother should never be in this position while leaving an elementary school. As the video gained traction, the comments shifted. Some people demanded answers. Others asked why so many children were involved. Parents wanted to know if the school had been warned. Teachers wanted to know why no adult intervened sooner. By the end of the night, the clip reached local journalists. The next morning, it played on television screens across Chicago. Reporters described it as one of the most disturbing scenes they had seen outside a school in years. City officials were contacted before sunrise. Police confirmed a mother and her son had been hospitalized in serious condition. The school district released a brief statement, acknowledging the video but offering little detail. But the pressure kept building. Because what people saw in that short clip was not confusion. And it wasn't an accident. It was the aftermath of something far more serious. Something that didn't start that day. Something that had been growing long before the camera ever started recording. And within the comment threads and reposts, a single message began to stand out. A message from someone who claimed they knew the family. A neighbor. Someone who said this attack was not the first warning. As the video continued spreading, a new thread began forming beneath it. Not from strangers, but from people who lived near the family. People who had seen the situation unfold long before the attack ever happened. One neighbor wrote, "This didn't start today. These same kids have been bothering that boy for nearly 2 years." Another added, "The school was told. More than once." Slowly, a picture began to form. A picture far more complicated than a single moment of violence. Corshawnda's son had been the target of repeated teasing, shoving, and verbal harassment. Incidents that were reported. Incidents that were discussed. Incidents that should have been addressed in a meaningful way, but were not. Parents in the community confirmed it. They described patterns of behavior from some of the same children seen in the video. Moments in hallways. Situations on the playground. Walks home that ended in fear. One neighbor said they had watched the attacks escalate over time. From words, to pushing, to moments where Corshawnda had to physically step in to get her son away. She did everything a parent is expected to do. She filed reports. She asked for help. She spoke with staff. She brought concerns to the people who were supposed to protect children during school hours.
My son he's very devastated. He'll wake up out of him in the middle of his sleep, screaming. He'll scream, "Mommy, are you there?" I felt helpless because I was down on the ground. And he was down on the ground. And he's looking at me screaming like, "Mommy, please help me, help me." I couldn't get up myself. I couldn't do nothing.
She's 6, she has sickle cell. So I guess they seen a little weakness on her because she's, kind of walking a little slow. And they have no right to put their hands on an adult.
Her messages were simple. "My son is being targeted. He doesn't feel safe. Please do something." But nothing truly changed. Every ignored warning added weight. Every unanswered concern added pressure. And eventually, the pressure erupted on that sidewalk. The most heartbreaking part was not that the attack happened, but that so many signs pointed toward it long before it occurred. This wasn't a single bad afternoon. It was a long timeline of missed opportunities, a series of moments where someone somewhere could have stepped in and changed the outcome. But no one did. And now, the consequences were being felt not only by a family, but by an entire city forced to confront what it had overlooked. By the following morning, the video had reached every corner of Chicago. Parents were sending it to each other. Teachers were watching it in disbelief. City officials were being asked for answers before they even finished their first cup of coffee. The school district released a short statement, a few sentences acknowledging the video, offering concern for the family, and promising cooperation with authorities. But for many people, it didn't feel like enough. It didn't address the history. It didn't mention the reports that had been made. It didn't explain how things had reached this point. The mayor spoke next. He called the footage traumatic and heartbreaking, and said no parent should ever experience something like this while leaving a school. He expressed sympathy. He offered resources. But the community wasn't asking for sympathy. They were asking for accountability. Outside Bright Elementary, parents gathered. Some held signs. Some held their children close. Many demanded a full review of what happened, not just on the day of the attack, but during the months that led up to it. Neighbors who had stayed quiet finally began to speak. They told reporters that this group of kids had been causing problems long before the video. They described moments when things could have been stopped early, moments when adults should have stepped in. Police confirmed they were investigating. Because the attackers were minors, the process would be slow and complex. Witnesses had to be interviewed. Parents had to be contacted. School officials had to cooperate. At the same time, community leaders pointed out something larger, the deeper issue beneath the surface. Questions about supervision. Questions about safety. Questions about how young children could reach a point where harming others became an option. The city reacted quickly, but the speed of statements did not undo the reality captured on video. A mother had been beaten. 2 children had been traumatized. And a school that should have been a safe place was now under a spotlight it could not escape. But while officials discussed policies and procedures, the family at the center of it all was facing a different kind of aftermath. One far more personal and far more painful. As the investigation moved forward, one question began to rise above all others. A question repeated in newsrooms, community meetings, and comment sections across the city. What happens now? Because every attacker captured in the video was a minor. Some were barely old enough to write full sentences. Others were only a few years away from high school. And the law does not treat children the same way it treats adults. Chicago police confirmed they were identifying everyone involved. They were speaking with families. They were reviewing footage, gathering statements, and piecing together the full timeline. But they also acknowledged something many people didn't want to hear. Any consequences would fall under juvenile law. That meant the process would be slow. It meant privacy rules would limit what could be shared publicly. And it meant the outcome could look very different from what the community expected. For many parents watching this unfold, that reality felt frustrating. The video showed a mother being beaten on a public sidewalk. It showed a child being kicked and dragged. It showed another child crying for help. But legally, these were still children committing the acts. So the next question became unavoidable. If the kids were responsible for the assault, then what about the adults who were supposed to guide them? Were parents accountable for what their children did on that sidewalk? Could they be held responsible for failing to control years of escalating behavior? Or would this be another case where the system addressed the incident, but not the roots of the incident? Legal experts weighed in online. Some argued that charges were possible. Others said the focus should be on intervention, not punishment. And many insisted that without consequences, moments like this could repeat themselves. Meanwhile, the family at the center of the case waited. Not for apologies, not for statements, but for some assurance that the people who hurt them, and the adults who allowed things to reach this point, would be held accountable in some way. It was a question the city couldn't avoid, and one that still had no clear answer. While the city argued over statements, consequences, and responsibility, Corshawnda and her children were facing something far more immediate: healing.
If they really move you to a new house in the neighborhood, I wish they stopped lying to y'all, please. Please. Don't take everything and run to the internet and run with it, because it's not true. Okay? We got this lady a house, we got this lady a car, we obligate a lie. That's a lie. That is a lie. Nobody is raising money for me. Nobody. Please stop believing the internet, please. I'm telling y'all gonna get the wrong answers.
Not the kind that shows up in headlines. Not the kind that comes from press conferences. The kind that happens in hospital rooms, living rooms, and long nights with no sleep. Corshawnda spent days under medical care. Her injuries were painful, but the physical wounds were only part of it. Living with sickle cell disease meant her body reacted differently. Every blow carried a deeper risk. Every moment of fear pushed her further toward a medical crisis. Doctors monitored her closely. Nurses moved gently around her bed. Her children visited when they could, and each visit told its own story. Her daughter held onto her mother's wrist the entire time, as if letting go would make the world shift again. She asked the same question more than once. "Mommy, are you coming home today?" Her son struggled in a different way. He had trouble sleeping. He would wake up crying from dreams that felt too real. Sometimes he called out for his mother before opening his eyes. Terrified, he would find himself alone again on the sidewalk. Therapists told the family that recovery would take time. Not just days, not just weeks, but an unknown stretch of future where fear would come and go without warning. Neighbors stepped in to help. Meals were dropped off. People arrived with clothes, toys, and support. A small fundraiser was created to help the family with medical costs and temporary needs. But no amount of help could erase the moment those children watched their mother fall to the ground. No assistance could erase the sound of her daughter screaming, or the feeling her son had when he tried to reach her through a crowd. Every family has a moment that divides life into before and after. For this family, that moment came outside an elementary school. A moment captured on video, but lived far deeper than any camera could show. Today, they are taking things one step at a time, one day at a time, holding on to each other a little tighter, staying close, trying to rebuild a feeling of safety that should never have been taken from them in the first place. But even as they begin that journey, questions remain. Questions the city still has not fully answered. As the days passed and the video continued to circulate, the noise around the case grew louder. More opinions, more debates, more demands for answers. But beneath all of the discussions, one truth remained. A mother was attacked while protecting her children, and the city is still trying to understand how it happened. People asked why no adult intervened sooner, why repeated warnings were overlooked, why a pattern stretching over 2 years was allowed to grow without real action. They questioned the environment that shaped the children who carried out the attack, and the environment that failed to protect the children who suffered because of it. For some, the video was a wake-up call. For others, it was a reminder of moments they had seen before, moments they feared could happen again. Because what happened on that sidewalk was more than an isolated confrontation. It exposed cracks in systems meant to protect the most vulnerable. Cracks that cannot be ignored anymore. As Corshawnda and her children begin their long recovery, the city must answer difficult questions. How do we protect children who say they are not safe? How do we guide those who harm others before the harm becomes irreversible? And how do we ensure a mother never again has to shield her children with her own body on the walk home from school? The full truth of this case is still unfolding. Investigations continue. Community pressure grows. And the family at the center of it all continues to rebuild their lives one day at a time. This story does not end with a headline. It ends with 3 people trying to find peace after a moment that should never have happened. And as we follow their journey, we're reminded that every community has a responsibility to listen when concerns are raised, to act before harm is done, and to protect the children who walk its streets. If you found this story important, and you want more cases told with care, depth, and full context, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.